court of Surakarta or the court of Jakarta or the court of. They are making in a concrete case saying this is in this case the principle of due care. You speak to lawyers. of good governance. I will show you that most important development in modern administrative law. Interesting thing is that it is also in line with the Dutch constitution. And I'm sure it's also in line with the Indonesian constitution. That's very relevant. I will ask you this morning, what are, from your perspective, relevant articles in your constitution? No, quickly. Oh, that was already the end. No conclusions. Yeah. Then there are 3 parts in the book and 3 elements in our discussion this morning. The first part is about the theory. The theory about principles, about the validity of principles. Because the question is, what does that mean in a legal perspective? Are they binding? Are they general binding? That is the first point. And I will make a distinction between the concept of a modern state, like rule of law, like democracy, like good governance, and the way these concepts have been worked out in principles, like principle of proper administration, due care, equality, non-discrimination, or principles of good governance, like transparency, participation, effectiveness. So I make a clear distinction between the concepts of a state and the principles which are worked out based on these concepts. That's part 1. Part 2 is about the general principles of proper administration. The general principles of proper administration, which are in Dutch de algemene beginselen van behoorlijk bestuur. That is what I told you in this book. It's in Dutch, so those who are reading Dutch, they can read it, but that is the start. That is the start. The start of principles of administrative law are these principles of proper administration. Also in your courts, they are applying these principles of proper administration. You will recognize them. These are the 8 principles of proper administration. It's very useful to write down these 8 principles on, at least to have in your mind, these 8 principles of proper administration. Because I was several times in Indonesia, and there is often a kind of confusion about what is a principle of proper administration. Now, these are the 8 principles of proper administration. During the lecture, I will work it out. And part 3 is about that broader view, these principles of good governance, these principles of good administration. And that is that broader view, Okay. Is it now clear to everyone? Okay, if somebody is sleeping already, then I did something wrong. Okay. I have a very enthusiastic pointer.
Yeah. Mr. Ramri, the microphone is echoing.
Sorry.
Yeah, the microphone in here is echoing, so it's better to.
Or shall I just it's for the candidates useful?
Keep using mic.
Yeah?
It's okay.
I should speak louder or not louder?
Louder.
Okay.
This is not a legal problem. This is a technical problem, to be honest. Please, can somebody of you do that with your computer? Because the pointer is not working. Can you go back? Back. Yeah, stop. I told you that there are three concepts of a modern state. Three concepts of a modern state of Indonesia. The first of all, the rule of law. The second is democracy. And the third is good governance. The first point, the rule of law, is often confusing. Because I could ask you, can you tell me the difference between the rule of law and the rechtsstaat? There will be, somebody will say, oh, there should be some difference, but I have no idea. So, to be clear, there are four elements of the concept of the rule of law. It's for each study element. If you are doing things in the field of economic law, or things in the field of environmental law, or in the field of tax law, in the field of financial law, what I'm saying is, for all you, is relevant. The rule of law means, first of all, the legality principle, the protection of legality. And that means, you know it, of course, that the government needs a legal base in the law. For their activities, there should be a legal base in the law. And that is for binding regulations, but also for factual regulation. For instance, I have learned yesterday that the government of Indonesia is making a kind of groups. Please, what is the term?
Holding of steroids.
Yeah, the holdings, they're creating holdings or public companies, and they are bringing companies together. Also, for that activity, from a rule of law perspective, the president or any other institution which is creating that is doing, should have a legal base. That's an interesting question because they don't believe. There was a separation of powers, and then it has changed. also in Indonesia. There is in Indonesia, but also in other modern countries, no longer a separation of power. There is a balance of powers. And I will explain you. When you look to the work of the legislator nowadays in Indonesia, not making legal binding regulations. They are creating powers to public administration institutions. So they are creating powers instead of making norms. And that means that the administration is nowadays making the regulation. So de facto, what in former times was the legislator, that is nowadays done by the executive. The executive power is making the regulations. Though the executive So no longer separation of power, a balance of power. That is important what you have to know. Then thirdly, there is an independent judiciary. Independent judiciary means that it's independent from the other. And it means that also this judiciary is referring to principles of law. Because as you know, we have two groups of legal norms, regulations, legislation, and principles. That are the two main sources of law. And independent judiciary is also creating these principles of law. And finally are the human rights, the protection of human rights. Okay, that are the four elements of the rule of law. So the rule of law is more than only legality. Please keep in mind, when you go to the US, they will say rule of law is legality. No, it's more. All the four elements are relevant. That's one concept. I'm telling you that because then it will be later clear why these principles of good governance are so important. The second is the concept of democracy. Also in your constitution. In the EU constitution, the concept of democracy is worked out. And how it's worked out? By the rights of citizens to elect representatives, to elect the president, to elect all kinds of officials. So there is the right of election for citizens, and they are elected representatives. It means a kind of indirect democracy, because only at the moment that you are doing the elections, you vote. This is the only moment when you have direct influence. Because when the representatives are sitting there is no influence anymore, formally spoken. And so you have only once in 4 or 5 years, you have direct right to elect. But in the other period, there's only one moment, and it's perhaps 1 minute. 1 minute in 5 years, there is direct democracy. The rest of these 5 years, there are indirect democracy by representatives, by parliamentarians. I don't know how you are thinking about parliamentarians,
but they have their own work and their own life. They are part of daily reality in the society, in Indonesia, but also in the Netherlands. What is missing? Missing is influence of the citizens, more direct influence. That is missing. And it is needed. What you see in practice is a growing distance, a growing gap between the government and the citizens. The government is actually there, far away from the daily life here. And also, they are doing what they want. And the citizens have not the feeling, not always the feeling, that the government has for them. They have the feeling the government is something else. It's outside what I want. It's outside. So therefore, direct democracy is very important. And I will explain how that is worked out by these principles of good governance. There is an additional need for direct democracy by citizens. I said something about the distance between the government and the citizens, the gap between the government and the citizens. But there are also growing distance within the government. When you look to the municipality of Surakarta and the central government in Jakarta, that's far away. There is, it seems sometimes also within the government that there are two governments, two different governments, and that they are doing different things. So there is not only a growing distance between the government and the citizens, but also within the government, between the central and the decentralized government. That distance is growing, that gap is also growing. Also there, you will see that these principles of good governance will be needed. Then we come to good governance. Norms for the government. You always have to realize good governance, and sometimes here in Indonesia, I saw they are using the word good governance also for companies, or for the management of the government, that they should be done by good governance. That is misunderstanding. That is wrong. Good governance is, in a sense, for the government. Good governance, norms for good governance, are norms for the government. And there is one thing I also have to tell you, and that has to do with terminology. When I speak about the government, it means all the powers in the state. It means the legislative power, executive power, judicial power, the fourth power. So, when we speak about the government, are all the powers in the state. When we speak about the administration, it's only one power, executive power. So, administration is only one power, government are all the powers in the state. So when we speak about good governance, it's in a sense known for all the powers in the state. When I speak about good administration, for especially the norms for the administration, for the executive power. So keep them in mind, this terminology. And based, as I said before, based on this concept, principles of law and more specific principles of administrative law have been worked out. Next slide, please. So, concluding important distinction between government, all the powers in the state, and the administrative power, and as I said, and which is also in the book, three main parts: general aspects of administrative law, then the general principles of proper administration, and finally the principles of good administration. So, as you can say, principles of proper administration of proper governance, and here also principles of good administration or principles of good governance. Yeah, the next one, please. When you look to your constitution, you will find something about the government in it. In our constitution, the concepts are worked out by the principles of administrative law. And when you look to the Netherlands constitution, there are since 2 months, so you are probably one of the first group of students who are reading this, it's written down, the constitution protects the concepts of the rule of law, democracy, and fundamental rights as part of good governance. So there is an obligation for all the institutions who are in the constitution mentioned that they have to follow rule of law, democracy, and good governance. So it has a constitution base. So the concepts are not only theory, they are binding. They are binding in the law. They are binding because of the constitution. So we are not only speaking in abstract words, we are speaking about the constitution. When you would do an exam, I would immediately ask you which articles of your constitution would be similar like this article. Okay, but there is no explanation today, so we just continue the presentation. Next, please. My idea is just to speak now about each of the 3 parts. And at the end of each part, I give you the opportunity to ask questions. Yeah? Yeah? So that you don't have to think too long about it. In the book, in theory, when we look about legal theory, there are 2 important streams, discussions in legal theory here in this context relevant. First of all, the discussion between positive and natural law. You remember the discussion between positive and natural law. Positive is the law as it is written down. That's positive law when it's written down in decisions of the court. That is positive law. But natural law is more from your brains or from a religious perspective, more from at least from an other people, human perspective, looking to the law and to know how it could be. It is the discussion between, and I'm saying it in Latin, jus constitutum and jus constituendum. How law is and how the law should be. There's always a discussion. And when I'm telling my students about legal theory, I say you are doing, you study law, not to read the law. Everybody, my mother, my father, my son and my daughter, they can read the law. You don't have to study 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years to know to read the law. No, you have to think about the idea behind the law, the idea behind the articles, and how it could be better. That is what you should do. That is your work, and you have already chosen for that by writing your doctoral thesis on that. You are the developers of the law, and your position is very important for the future. So developing idea, you always have to know how positive law is. You have to know how the law is. You have to know how the case law is. But finally, it is the main point of your thesis is what is new. I always have one very important condition for a PhD student, so I would say to all of you, your studies should be innovative. There should be new elements in your study. I don't want to read how it is. Everybody knows how it is. No, I want to read how it should be. How it should be. How can we change the law? How can we change administrative law or financial law or economic law because of the certain expectation? Okay. So positive versus natural law, and there is always a kind of balance when you look to legal articles. There's always a balance between positive and natural law. The second discussion in legal theory is between the definition approach and the interest approach. Well, what is for you most important? Do you think it's most important good definition, so know exactly how good or narrow a law will be, good definitions? Or do you think it's a question of interest? Are you looking for good legislation, how the interests of people, companies, or whatever are well organized? It's a difficult question, and also there is a kind of balance. I always say, start with good definitions, and then go, of course, you have to look how the civil participants in the topic what you are doing are there pay their attention. So that is the definition approach and interest approach. And these discussions are important because of the question, the validity of law. The validity of law. What is the real validity of law in the context of the principles of law which we work out? Okay. That's the first thing I want to bring you, give you, which is what is relevant for you. For everybody. You have to choose between positive and natural law. You have to choose between definitions and interest. So you have to think about that. The second point, which I also have worked out, is the question of terminology. When you look to a kind of hierarchy, you can say on most abstract level is the concept or the ideas. The concept and the ideas of the topic are very broad, very abstract. That is, rule of law is quite abstract notion. Democracy is broad. But when you have these concepts, they are making more concrete by principle. You make concepts concrete by principle. You are specification of these concepts. So it's a very logical line of starting with this concept and then looking to these principles, which are specifications of the concept. Specification of the rule of law, specification of democracy, specification of good government. So, the abstract level is concepts and ideas, then we have principles, and these principles are worked out in rules. So that is the most concrete way in rules or concrete decisions. So we have a hierarchy in concepts, then principles which are more concrete, and most concrete are the individual decisions or the regulations. So that's the question of terminology, which is also very relevant in way of systematic thinking about legal norms. Then I ask you really your attention for this point, that we have 4 powers instead of 3 powers. They are often forget, for instance, the work of Council of State, the Court of Audit, the Ombudsman. These are, they cannot binding, legal binding decisions. They give recommendations, or they give advice. So you can say in that sense, it's not binding as it is in regulation or a complete decision, but it has influence. It has influence in a more indirect way, and therefore I mentioned it, the fourth power. And then finally, the last point, what I also mentioned already, that there is, let me say, there should be a kind of optimal balance between the powers, the institutions, and the functions. So when we speak about the legislator, we have the legislator as an institution, we have the legislative function, and we have legislation and product. There are three different things. The legislator is still the institution. The legislation, which originally came from the legislator, but nowadays is coming from the executive power. Because, I said, the legislator is just creating powers for the administration. So, it means that the legislative function is more worked out by the executive. That is very important to know, because the people are not involved. When you look to your executive power, or when you look to the president or the ministers, they have thousands of rules, regulations. People have no idea about it. It's already difficult to have an overview of all the laws, but it's even impossible to have an overview of all the regulations. And in a sense, that is legislation. So therefore, it's important to look no more separation of power. There is a balance of power. Make a difference between the powers, the institutions, and the functions. 1 second, please. Then I have to look to my slide. Yeah. This is a good moment to give you the opportunity to give the microphone to those who have a question about this first part and what I have said this morning. Who has a question? And there are not stupid questions, there are only intelligent questions here. Please.
Good morning, sir. My name is Alisa. Thank you for the opportunity, sir. It is a very interesting discussion. With all of this, sir, as you said before, nowadays legislative only regulations that creates power, not legally binding law or norms.
Yeah.
So I have two questions, sir. First, are there any parameters of good rule of law that can be implemented in every state? Secondly, the challenge is how to balance between rule of law, democracy, and fundamental.
Already immediate very fundamental question. Yeah, first of all, you are right. When you look to the law, it's creating powers to the administration, and you are asking, is there influence of the parliamentarians in relation to the administration? Now, on that point, I must say, incidentally, the parliamentarians are asking about some implementation regulation or the practice. Sometimes, not always, because they don't know it. They don't know it. They are not at the sea of these regulations. At the sea are the society. So it depends on the controlling function. They have lost their power as a legislator. They have lost their power as a legislator because they created the power, they gave the power to the administration. So the only influence a parliamentarian has is by controlling, but controlling afterwards. Controlling afterwards. And sometimes they're saying, oh, please, President, please, Minister, you have to stop.
We have some questions, but that's incidental. That's only when it's in the newspaper or something like that, and the television. So, in a sense, they have lost their powers. It's only by controlling afterwards they have influence. So that's the complete answer of your question. How these three concepts are related to each other, that is a difficult question. And because from my perspective, it is a kind of theoretical model what I'm describing. And when you look to practice, I would say, of course, rule of law and democracy and human rights are also interrelated. It is not separated, as that is not a separation of powers, that is not a real separation of concept. But when you look to the heart of the concept, they are separated. When you look to the heart of the rule of law, it has its own position. When you look to the heart of democracy, it has its own position. When you look to the heart of good governance, including human rights, it has its own position. When you look at the development of how these three concepts have been developed, you can say, and I'm speaking about the Dutch situation, in the 18th century, in the 18th, 19th century, there was the rule of law, and in the 19th century, it was more democracy, and in the 20th century, and in the 21st century, is good governance and human rights. So what you see, they are in history different moments in which the origin starts, but nowadays all the three concepts are still developing. Is that an answer to your question?
So between the three concepts, with the balance between the role of the question provided until now, they are still developing and depending to each other.
Yeah, exactly. There are links to each other, but it's important to distinguish them because otherwise they are just mixing democratic law. When you ask a parliamentarian what is democratic rule of law, he has a very far notion. And what I'm doing, I separated to have about three context. Other questions? Yes, please.
Okay, thank you, sir. I would like to ask your opinion regarding the decision of our Constitutional Court.
What's the Constitutional Court?
Yeah, Constitutional Court of Indonesia. So you have already explained us before that the first element of rule of law is that there is protection of legality. And in Indonesia, we have the law number 11/2020 regarding appropriations that defines more than 60 regulations, more than 60 law in Indonesia. And then a year after the law being enacted, the Constitutional Court decided that the law is unconstitutional with certain conditions, where the court gives the government 2 years to fix the lack of the law. And if after 2 years the government couldn't fix it, then the law will be declared as unconstitutional. So, however, in here, we need certainty in do certain business and other activity. Since the law requires more than 60 law, more than 60 regulations, that's why in Indonesia it is called as omnibus law. So how is your opinion, sir, regarding the protection of legality related to the decision of the Constitutional Court of Indonesia?
Yeah, thank you very much. A very good question, interesting question. Political, sensible question. Also, I understand, of course. Political. Let me tell you something new about the Netherlands. That's perhaps also good, just to have another view on this internal Indonesian discussion. of course, in the Netherlands, there is a discussion about constitutional review. And till now, it was not done. The idea of not to have constitutional review was that, like you find that also even more clear from the law system, the highest level is the legislator. And the legislator has the highest power in the state. And that should be not reviewed by the judiciary. And why? The judiciary is independent, but the legislator is coming from the citizens. So that is the idea. So we should not have constitutional review. That was the original idea. But in the same constitution, it's written down in that letter. When you have direct working international law, for instance, in the field of human rights, you have to apply it. So it means there is a kind of hole in that system of highest power of the legislator, a kind of hole in which the court can look to international law, like the international human rights law, and apply it, direct working international rights law, and apply it in a concrete case. So, in a sense, without asking the legislator, they can give their opinion in a case and say, this regulation or this situation is a violation of this direct working international law. And in our system, in our constitutional system, the court has to apply it. So that was the first. More and more, there is in our country critics about the legislation, critics about the quality of the legislation. We have a Council of State which is given advice in new regulation, but it's quite weak, I would say, a very old-fashioned institution. Sorry that I have to say, colleagues of me are working in it, but it is. So there started the discussion, shouldn't we have a kind of constitutional review program? Because we have the experience with international human rights treaties, we are positive about it, and the courts are applying it. So why shouldn't we do that? And just 4 weeks ago, the minister has written to the parliament, now, I think it's not bad, it's even good to create the possibility of constitutional review by a court. So she is changing, she is a very good minister, she's changing the situation, but of course the legislation has to be changed. But now the question is, should we have a constitutional court, or should the constitutional review done by the ordinary court? And what has she shown? She has said, my idea is that constitutional review should be done by the ordinary court. So we want to prevent all kinds of coordination problems between a constitutional court and the other courts and the society. I think, the minister thinks, it is the best to give that to the ordinary. It means in the future, because you have to change the constitution in it, to change the constitution in the Netherlands, and that is a question of 5-6 years. So it takes a long time. But the idea in the Netherlands is to have constitutional review by the ordinary court. And that means we will not have a constitutional court, we will have constitutional review by the ordinary court. So that will be another solution than what you have in your system. Nevertheless, your question is relevant. The question is from a legal point relevant. And now I'm saying to my private opinion that I have not any link with the political party or anybody here. So I'm just, that is a nice thing when you are working at the university. Then you can think in a way. That's also what you work is. When you have the constitutional court, I know here when how was it? I was looking, how was the first president of the Constitutional Court? There were problems there were so many questions for the Constitutional Court. It was an enormous workload, and they had years and years before they were finished. So there were institutional problems, let's say. But when you look in a formal way, when the Constitutional concludes that a regulation or a law is a violation of the Constitution, it means violation of the legal Constitution. It means illegal. And formally, when we speak about legislation, that means common, and I'm speaking in terms because you are asking what all the people in society. The consequence would be that there is a kind of civil liability for the state for this illegal regulation, this illegal legislation. In our country, there is then we have normal procedure, and those who have had damage because of this illegal legislation, they can ask a compensation, they can ask to receive the money for the damage they have because of this. So that would be in our regulation, our case law, it is when there is illegal regulation, it means that there should, and there is damage, because that's also important, but there's damage, then there should be paid back by the state, which is responsible, perhaps when it is on local level, the municipality, which has made regulations. So in your situation, it will give all kinds of problems about these 60 regulations. I can imagine that is a quite chaotic situation, but it is most problematic for those who have the damage. And in our situation, there would be a claim procedure to the state, and the outcome that the government has to pay compensation. Is that an answer to your question?
So how about the decisions of the court that say that law is unconstitutional with certain conditions? I mean, that's a new thing in Indonesia when the court decides a certain regulation unconstitutional, but with certain conditions. So that's what I'm asking. So whether in Netherlands.
But I want to have it more precise. So the constitutional is saying it's unconstitutional under certain circumstances.
Yeah.
Is that what they're saying?
Yeah. So the court gives the government 2 years to fix the law.
Oh, yeah.
Or if the government couldn't fix the law in 2 years, within 2 years, so the law will be declared inconstitutional. That's of course that's possible. That's because the Constitutional Court has already seen the consequence and say I cannot say that it is unconstitutional under without any condition. So therefore they made that condition. I must say, I can imagine that you would be critical about that. I would say you would be critical because then I would say, when I would be a member of the Constitutional Court, then I would say in the new regulation there should be compensation for those who have had damage in the old situation. That should be, from my perspective, most correct way. And if they are not doing it, then I would advise those people to go to court. Thank you.
Yes.
I have questions, but I have comments about this for power.
Yeah.
I think about court of audit or national officer. It's not for power, but yeah, it's not from the executive element. So it's not from the legislative and executive power because they are elected by the like parliament or the government, like the data or and that's why they don't have legal binding of the decision or recommendation.
That's a good point what you make, of course. Thank you very much. Now, I'm not sure that they are under the parliament and they are under the executive power. Of course, you're right, especially the ombudsman, who is appointed by the parliament, at least in our country, probably also here. So I understand that point, but it is, sorry that I'm saying it, it's quite old-fashioned approach, what you are saying, because they are more between the powers. They have kind of special function to overlap, let me say, gaps which are between the powers. And therefore, they have created an ombudsman, therefore, they have created a court of audit. In relation to the court of audit, there is a special situation. I think in relation to the court of audit, there is a special situation, which is a kind of internal court of audit. Yeah, you know it better than I. Which is part of the ministry audit. And you have a more external court of audit. And I'm speaking about the external court of audit, not the internal, because you are right. So I would not say they are under them, they are in between. And there is not, for instance, there is not, they have certain independence. It is not, in our country, for instance, the ombudsman is independent. In our country, the court of audit is independent. So you cannot say that they are part of powers. So therefore, I would say, from my perspective, and speaking about the Dutch situation, it is not under the parliament or under the executive power. No, it's next to it, in between. I don't know if you agree with me, but I know much better the Indonesian situation than I know, so perhaps could be that you are.
Yeah, because in Indonesia, like the auditor is elected by the parliament, but the people who or by the president, like people government.
Yeah, but that's not a problem. No, that's another problem. Then the auditor is responsible for the civil servants who are working for him. So then, formally spoken, these people are under the responsibility of the audit, I would say. Okay. Other questions? And if not, nobody? Is it useful what I'm telling you? Yeah, can we go on? Or should there be a break? Do we just go on? Okay, better. I would like to have the next slide, please. Yeah. From a classical view, the judiciary has developed these principles of propriety. And they have developed them by interpretation of the law. So these principles are developed by the judiciary and are judicial developed norms. In a concrete case, these principles have been applied and have a certain context, but they only are binding in that specific case, that they are only binding. More and more, because there was an enormous growth of this court's decision, an enormous growth of application and developing these principles of properness. Therefore, there was a request, please make a codification of it, because people don't know anymore what is the content of each principle. So there was a request just to make a law in which the principles are codified. And the consequence of that is that these principles are no longer binding in that individual case. They have become general binding rules. General binding rules. The problem now is when you look in the discussion about the principles of openness, often you have to say one or more aspects of a principle have been codified. Never the whole principle has been codified, mostly partly. So the interesting situation is that when we look to principles of proper administration, they have been partly codified, partly they are general binding, and partly they are unwritten law still. So it's very important to have clear what is an unwritten part of the principle and what is the written part of the principle. Okay, so it makes more complex. So always look which aspects of the principle have been codified. Some principles, for instance, the principle of due care, in our Gala has been developed for 90%. But there are also principles which are only partly worked out. For instance, proportionality is only partly worked out in the law. So it is a question of broader or less broad codification. So if you are looking to the law, you always have to look which elements have been codified. The consequence is that you, of each of these 8 principles, you have to distinguish elements, sub-principles, and that is what I have written down in the book. And in the book, I have written down, in this old book, I have written down of each principle, each element. And I have written down which element has been codified, which element is still unwritten. So, thinking about these principles of proper administration is not so easy. You always will try in practice to make a link with a regulation with the Gala, because that makes it most strong, that principle. But it's always part of it. So, and it depends on the situation. If you have to refer to an article from the Ghana, or you have to refer to an unwritten principle. Especially in the judiciary, in the case law, this specification of principles have been worked out. I made a kind of overview, 1 page, in which you find these 8 principles, and for each principle I have worked out the sub-principles. That is very easy, and I don't have the Bahasa version to do, but it could be perhaps translated if somebody wants to do that. That would be perhaps useful just to have a better view. But there are more. So you can say by the codification of these principles, it is also the legislator who are developing these principles. Because they are creating, based on the case law, they are creating the principle. It's the first step. So The legislature is creating principles, the executive power is creating principles, and the judiciary is creating principles. All these three powers of the state are creating principles of proper administration, or perhaps we have to say proper government. Okay. And finally, all the fourth power, so these advising institutions, they are working with principles. So also the Court of Audit, there is, I don't know if somebody is interested in the Court of Audit. There is just one of my students has written down and finished his PhD study on Court of Audit and good governance. And he has exactly worked out these principles in the work of the Court of Audit. So the Court of Audit is not only looking at financial issues, but also to the legal issues. And that is very interesting. It makes the role of the Court of Audit broader than just a financial institution. And what I want to say, these fourth power institutions, they are also working with these principles of proper administration. Yeah, next slide, please. Now here, there's the list. There is the list of the 8 principles. And of course, I could ask you in an examination, please explain me the principle of legal certainty. The students have to know it. And my students are dreaming about principles. They're dreaming about these principles of, in the beginning about the principle of proper administration, but nowadays they are dreaming of good administration. But let's have I will say a few words about each principle. It's quite useful, and it's important. Potential, each of these principles are codified in the Gala, most or partly. So it would be interesting when you are working with this issue, it would be interesting to find out how much has been worked out in your administrative law act on these principles. What I noticed also in my work on principles of local administration, that there is sometimes norm is a prohibition norm, prohibition of détournement de pouvoir, the prohibition of misuse of power. That is the negative side, but you find in the legislative and also by the other institutions also the positive side of the norm, what we call speciality principle. Speciality principle. The administration has to apply the speciality principle, and the speciality principle means that, for instance, when the administration has the power for subsidy, let me say, sport institutions, then the minister say, no, the sports institution doesn't need the money. I give it to new concerts for music. And they are subsidizing concerts. Violating the speciality principle. Because in the law is down, it's only for sport. So it means it's not for music or any other activity. So that is the positive side of the first principle. Prohibition is the negative side, that is prohibition of misuse of power. The positive side is that you have to deal according to the aim of the power. The second principle has also a positive and a negative side. First, the negative. Prohibition of arbitrariness. It's clear that it's prohibited to be arbitrary as administrative authority. The positive side is that you have to be reasonable. The government has to be reasonable. So you can say the reasonableness principle. So we see the first and the second, a positive and a negative, a positive and a negative. Then the third principle is the principle of legal certainty. Principle of legal certainty. And legal certainty means, for instance, that there must be clear norms in the law or in the regulation. And the citizens have the right to be that is clear what are the norms for the citizens. Legal certainty. Then the principle of legitimate expectations. There's often the following situation that, for instance, a country wants to have a license, environmental license, going to the municipality. I always say, yeah, let's say there's a Coca-Cola company here in Kuliah, want to build a factory, and they are speaking with civil servants, and okay, the boss, okay, it's okay, you will get the license, and then suddenly there is critics because of environmental problems. They say, no, this is too big factory, or they are spoiling the environment, or they have made environmental problems. And they say, okay, we are refusing the license. And then Coca-Cola company can say, yeah, that is violating of the principle of legitimate expectation. Yeah? Then the principle of equality. Principle of equality. We had earlier this week one of, I think it was one of the doctoral students, but I'm not sure, also a master student. She had done research about women in parliament. They said, yeah, we should make quantitative norms about women in parliament. We should have 50% women in parliament and 50% men. That is what we are working on. So she had worked it out. Okay. Equality principle. I asked her two questions. First of all, I said, is that a task of the legislator to say that 50% of the parliamentarians should be men and 50% should be women? One. Or should that be done by the parliamentarians, by the parties? So shouldn't we say the parties should have for 50% women candidates and for 50% men candidates, and that they are on the list? That was one question. The second question I said, yeah, and it is not my question. What I'm asking is not related to women or men. It's for both the same. How can we guarantee that we have the good quality of people? We should have well-qualified persons, because we can say, yeah, we need 50% of men, and we have only, let me say, not still to say, so we don't have such a brilliant men as a candidate. So we can also say about women. My question was, how can you guarantee when you are making quantitative norms? How can you guarantee that there is a good quality in both sides? Now, that is an example of working with the equality principle. That is the positive side. The negative side is the prohibition to discriminate. The prohibition to discriminate. I heard this morning one of you is writing and teaches on discrimination in tax law. Yeah, very interesting question. Is that allowed to discriminate in the text. Immediately you will say, hey, that's not allowed. I also would have the same idea. But sometimes there can be a reason to make a difference between one and another book. And it's not only text law, there's also another. You can, for instance, say, I want to be, for instance, when you speak about companies, I want to prefer environmental friendly companies in my village or in my city. So I say, when you want to have an environmental law license, yeah, you have to be an environmental friendly company. So then you are discriminating. In a sense, yeah, you can say about tax law, they say, now people who have a low salary, they have to pay very low tax. Well, people with a high salary, they have to pay a low tax. It's discrimination. This is, of course, very logical. But what I want to say, there can be reasons to discriminate, to make difference. So how we are doing that, we are saying, yeah, that must be a good reason, a good argument, a good case for making difference. So that is the way how that equality principle or prohibition of discrimination is worked out. The principle of proportionality. The principle of proportionality is a principle which you especially find out in the field of sanctions. In the field of sanctions, mostly. And when you are, for instance, administrative sanctions, when you are driving in your car, they are, I saw it on the motorway. Oh, that's very funny. On the motorway, I came from Tamara, and not driving by myself, because it's so dangerous. From Tamara to Solo. And I said, I saw on the alert, minimum 60 kilometers, maximum 80 kilometers. And the driver, he was driving 100. Of course, I didn't say anything because I was very But okay, then I hope we get fine. But let's say, when you have maximum of 80 and you're driving, let's say 85, and you have to pay for that 1 billion rupiah. That is quite a lot of these 5 kilometers. So I would say this sanction is not in proportion to my illegal activity. So proportionality is looking from one side, what is the illegal activity and what is the level of the sanction. And you have to be definitely in proportion to each other. Then we are coming to the principle of due care. Principle of due care is, yeah, you have to be very careful. And careful, that's a principle which is very detailed worked out in the case law. That is means already in the very early stage of negotiation between whether you need a license between you and the administrative authorities about the license. But it has also other consequences in relation to the activities of the administrator. And finally, principle of motivation. Principle of motivation means two things. There should be a motivation in the decision, and that there are always two elements of the principle of motivation. Okay, now what I'm saying, yes, I'm sorry, I can. Okay. There is a process of development of new sub-principles, and they are worked out. But this is the overview. Now you have the overview of these principles of complex. Any question about it? or you are just like to have a coffee like me? Then we just go on. Or do you want to have a break? Or, what is normal? I'm flexible. I just speak on. Shall we go to the yeah. Okay, nobody sleeping? Next slide, please. I didn't hear that. That's somebody else speaking. No, I was not sure. Important, we are now speaking about good administration. We are speaking about good governance. You know the clear difference between good governance and good administration, because good governance is are all the powers in the state, and good administration is only one power, the administrative power. So we are voting not only constitutional and administrative law, and we also look at international law and the general principles of law. And when we are doing it, things are becoming more and more clear. Next slide, please. These are the 6 principles. And I'm saying now already, when you are in your car, when you are on your bike, when you are on your motorbike, you have to be very careful. But keep in mind these 6 principles of good governance: principle of propriety, principle of transparency, principle of participation, principle of effectiveness, principle of accountability, and principle of human rights. I will explain to you more about these broad, new, adequate principles as I have worked out in this book, Good Governance Concept and Concept. First of all, the principle of propriety. I have already said this principle of propriety is in a sense also similar to the principle of governance, which we already discussed. These 8 principles, and you know that. But it is a little broader. It is a little broader when you look to the ombudsman work. The ombudsman has a more broader perspective, and therefore all propriety is also including the norms of the ombudsman. In that sense, it's broader than only this principle of governance. That's one. We know that. Then the principle about transparency. And principle of transparency is very crucial. And now you have to think about what I have said before. I said earlier this morning that there is a shift in legislation where the regulation came from the legislator, and nowadays it's coming from the executive power. A shift of legislation from legislator to executive power. That is important because in this executive power legislation, the citizens is not involved. The citizens is not involved. The citizens was involved by the representatives in the legislator, but the legislation coming from the executive power, the citizens are not involved. And therefore, the principle of transparency is crucial. It means that the government, it means all the governments, but especially the administration, should publish their information. Publish information which the government has done by themselves, which on request or on its own initiative. So that is one. Transparency in relation to public information. The second thing is that also the decisions of the administration should be published. It can, of course, in an electronic way, it can be in a paper way, or different ways, but they should be transparent, they should be public. And the third point is in transparency, that the meetings of the government should be transparent, should be open. should be about open on points which are discussed. So the principle of transparency is a kind of democratic principle. It helps the people to get the information and to be involved in the work of the administration. So to make an important bridge between the government and the citizens. Then we have the principle of participation. So when the people have their information, then you have also the idea and the possibility that people are willing, but also that they should be involved in that process, should participate in that process of developing policies. Very important, that participation. And that can be done in different ways. That can be done by initiative of the citizen. It can be done by citizen forum. Citizen forum can be done. It can be all ways of participation. It can be done by the referenda. So there are different ways of having this principle of participation work out. Principle of effectiveness. I've spoken too much.
Oh, yeah.
The principle of effectiveness, a very important principle, and often people are thinking that is not a legal question, that is a social science question. No, effectiveness is a legal question, and it means that there should be an obligation for the government to look to the effect of that regulation. Not only making regulation, but also to examine the effect of the regulation. So that we know that the aim of the regulation will be realized. So the principle of effectiveness is very new, very important principle in these principles of good governance. Principle of accountability. Accountability. That the administrative authorities is accountable for what they are saying, what they are doing, the decisions that they are taking. Accountable to the representative, to the parliament, to the council, but also civil servants are accountable for their work. So accountable has a very broad meaning in that sense. And finally, the principle of human rights. And the term human rights, I have to explain you, that is not often correct. Human rights is not always a right. Do you understand that? No. I can imagine that you don't know. Human rights are legally spoken, worked out in a different way. Sometimes human rights are civil rights, rights for citizens. You are the owner of the house, or you are the owner of the bicycle, or you are the so civil rights. But when we speak about the social rights, it's not a right in the sense of that it should be, what is legally spoken, it is an obligation for the government. So it's not a right, it's an obligation. So in a sense, we have to speak about human rights principles. Human rights principles. And sometimes human rights principle is worked out by rights, civil rights, but sometimes it's worked out as an obligation, like to take care for public health, or to take care for a good environment, or whatever. Or to, an example, the right to good administration is worked out in the European Constitution. The right to good administration is the obligation. Not right. It's the obligation for the administration to do it in a good way. So human rights are sometimes worked out as rights, sometimes worked out as an obligation. So it's correct way from a legal perspective not to speak anymore about human rights. No, human rights principles. And sometimes they are your rights in the legal sense, sometimes it's your obligation in the legal sense. I hope you understand now, Marco. Yeah? Okay, okay. Perhaps the last slide, because I tried to finish but before we are finishing, I will mention first the conclusion, then you have the opportunity to ask questions if you want. Now, very quickly, 3 essential concepts: rule of law, democracy, and good governance. These concepts have been dealt by legally binding elements from the constitutional and administrative law perspective. Different legal theories related to the binding effect, natural theory workout. Difference between government and administration, the classical general principles of openness, of propriety, different contexts, and the new principles of governance. Which are there: propriety, transparency, participation, activeness, accountability, and human rights. And now you have the opportunity to ask your question, and I have said enough. What are the questions? Nobody's saying now, of course, because everybody wants to go home. Waiting for is there anybody who has a question? No?
Is there any exception? You have described the 6 principles of good administration. So the question is, to what extent each principle should be implemented, and is there any exceptions not to implement principle or more principles?
No, there are no exceptions. Principles are absolute. But the way principles are worked out is different. So principles are absolute. It's more absolute than a regulation. You don't expect that, but it's absolute. But you always have to see it's worked out in a different way. When we speak about propriety, when we speak about transparency, when we speak about participation, when we speak about effectiveness, when we speak about accountability, when we speak about human rights. It's always, these are really fundamental, absolute working principles. The way they are working out are as I explained. Other questions?
Next question, I want to know if in Netherlands, as a citizen, can we know about coming out of budgeting government or government budgeting? Because in Indonesia, we know, or in here maybe, we can get information about coming of budgeting government or government budgeting or APBN. Maybe we can compare or any opinion from you. Thank you.
Yeah. You are asking about the most important principle, I would say, principle of transparency, and especially intellectual information. And we just have, since 2 years, a new Information Act. It's called the Open Overhead, the Open Government. It's the new norm. And everybody has a right to ask for information, but the government has also to give information. That's true. It's right. There's also obligation for the government to give information. Of course, there are some exceptions when it is in the interest of the country or when it is pure private or something like that. So there are some exceptions, of course. So there is a new modern way, and everybody can ask. Everybody can ask. Even if you're on visit in the Netherlands, you can ask for the information. You have to specify which information you want. So when you are asking for it, I want to have from the Minister of Environment the information on climate change. That is too then you have kilometers of paperwork. Now you have to specify the request. It should be on climate change related to the farmer's work or something like that. Then you have to specify your request. And of course, the government has also to do it by themselves. When it is about regulations, they have to be that. Yeah? Other questions? No? That can mean two things. That I was clear, but it could also be that you are happy to go home. I don't know which is most important. Probably the same. It was nice to be here. I thought I had promised to give my email. Olivia, can you give the email? You mentioned my email address to the people if they want to have it. So my email address g.h.edding@uu.nl. Now perhaps you can give that information to the student. Now I will give you the microphone and then.
We can read also. You can read.
Oh, okay. Where can I? Oh, that. I see it. Where is Acrobat here?
Okay.
No, then this. Oh yeah, you see it already. Yeah, it's coming. Okay, so if you have, and then I would advise ask the dean to buy this book because, or by yourself. Can you? Perhaps you can go down here, and you can show it. There should be, yeah. No, it's not what I mean. I thought it would be the book on Oxford University Press. Can you? Oh, you read? Oh, you read? But just by oh, you read. Plus, no. O-U-P. Yeah. Then we should have it. Go down.
Is it, sir?
Yeah, that is it. Yeah. Yeah, this is it. This is the book. No, this is the price. Can you go down on the track? I don't know if that is US dollar. And you can find also the ebook. So that's what, then you have all the information I have. It was nice to have you here. If you have any questions, I will read it in my email. Most welcome. You're most welcome to Utrecht University, the best university in the Netherlands, better than Leiden. Sorry for that. And very nice city, Utrecht University. So enjoy your time here, but also when you're coming to the Netherlands. I wish you all the best with your study, and I hope that it will be excellent. All crowded. That would be fine. Thank you very much.
Take a picture.
Yeah, would you like to take a picture with us? Well, we would like to have a picture with you, if you don't mind.
The picture.
Oh iya.
Di depan aja.
Di sini ke depan aja ya.
Di depan aja. Di depan.
For the picture, you are invited here. Invited here.
Silahkan di depan, yang depan semua alat itu.
Ya, oke.
Untuk yang di Zoom bisa open kamera semua. Yang di Zoom open kamera untuk foto bareng. Ya. Untuk yang di Zoom bisa open kamera biar foto bareng juga. Oke, open kamera semua yang di Zoom. Biar bisa ikutan foto. Ya, yang di Zoom.
Tomorrow in the newspaper.
Wah, terlalu canggih itu banyak. Susah saya. Baik. 1, 2.
Siap ya. Untuk yang di Zoom siap. Ya, 3, 2, 1. Oke. Oke, in Zoom 3, 2, 1. Okay. For Zoom, once again, 3, 2, 1. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Ya, terima kasih buat yang di Zoom. Thank you for in Zoom.
Masih Bu. Masih Bu. Apun kamu. Oh gitu ya. Tadi kita
1, 2, 3.
Mohon izin yang di Zoom. Akan saya tutup ya. Terima kasih untuk atensinya. Itu apa itunya providing kayaknya. Itunya providing.
Ya. Dengan bapaknya mungkin bisa berdua atau mungkin pas di depan kita berdua dan bapaknya monggo.